And good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock Monday. Time for the Deal Doctor live stream. Thanks for joining. And if you look at this later, welcome then. A couple of quick announcements. The National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics training. If you are a GRAR member, Greater Regional Alliance of Realtors, they require that you complete the training by December 31st. This is not Con Ed. Don't get it confused with Con Ed. It is Code of Ethics training, and it's required by the National Association of Realtors every 2 years. Now, GRAR pushes it forward a year in terms of their deadline. So GRAR operates like a year ahead for the Code of Ethics training. So if you are a GRAR member, be sure to get on and complete your Code of Ethics training before the end of this year, or you will probably get notices that your membership is going to be canceled and you're not going to be able to get on the MLS and all that stuff. So just a reminder. Another reminder, sign up for the Christmas party. I didn't do that commercial so that we could only have part of you there, okay? So I want to make that clear. We'd love to have you. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great event, as it always is. Con Ed 2020. Save the date, January 7th. 2020. Again, I've had the opportunity to see what we're going to present. I think it's going to be really good for a lot of agents, both new to the business or been in the business a while, and even the most experienced of agents will get a lot out of this. We are going to bring in our own litigator, the person who does the litigating for 5-Star Real Estate. When we get dragged into court, he's the guy, and you're going to hear from him, and you're going to hear from about case studies that we have been faced with in court. And I think that getting his perspective, the actual litigator's perspective about what we need and how we can improve and avoid those situations is going to be really, really important. On November 11, 1918, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, an armistice was signed in France in 1918, and it ended the war that we now know as World War I. Armistice Day has been celebrated. It began being acknowledged the following year, and it's now the 100th anniversary of the acknowledgement of what is known throughout the world as Armistice Day. In 1954, Dwight Eisenhower wanted to expand the recognition for our veterans of all wars, World War I, Korea, World War II, Vietnam, later. So today is the 11th day of the 11th month, and I wish all of our veterans the very, very best, a big thank you, and I hope that you will all take an opportunity to, if you know a vet, thank them. If you don't know a vet, find one and thank them. That's my thought. Happy Veterans Day. Veterans, thank you for your service. Pocket list. Let's talk about those pocket listings. The phrase came up, pocket listing, last week on our, I don't know if it was on our Facebook page or on a GRAR page or something, but my eyes immediately went to the phrase pocket listing. And I want to back up and explain what a pocket listing is. A pocket listing is exactly what it sounds like. I take a listing, I have the seller sign the listing, and then I take it and I shove it in my back pocket. And then I go around to people and say, hey, would you like to buy a 3-bedroom ranch, 2 baths, brick, and so on and so forth? And I don't, and my objective is to double dip the listing. That is a pocket listing. Now, back in about 1964, it was perfectly legal to do, to have a pocket listing. As long as your broker said it was okay, you could go out and take a listing and put it in your back pocket and not tell anybody about it. Keep it in a separate drawer in your desk. But then we became signatories to the multiple listing service. Okay? When we all became signatories to the multiple listing service, one of the requirements is that we submit all listings to the multiple listing service. And I believe it's within 3 days of the fully executed listing contract that we have to have it loaded up on the MLS. Now, each MLS is different, so just be aware that whatever your MLS rules are for submitting a listing, they have to be abided by you when you get a listing. Unless your seller specifically in writing on the listing contract says, seller requests that this listing is not shared with the MLS. Now, I don't know too many instances where a seller would do that, how they would see that would benefit them, not getting the exposure to the MLS. And in fact, in most of the cases where that has happened, it has come out later that it was really the agent's suggestion to put that language in there so that then the agent could pack it up and stick it in their back pocket. Now, today, the phrase pocket listing is kind of morphed and it's blurry. It's ambiguous. Nobody really knows what you mean when you say pocket listing. I will tell you that the Grand Rapids Association of Realtors will perceive that language as a violation, that you are sitting there with a listing that you have not turned in and loaded up to the MLS. And they will investigate. That phrase, if put out on Facebook, will probably get reported to the MLS, and the MLS will go looking for that address with trying to find a listing. And they might call you, or they might call your broker, one of your office managers, to say, where is this pocket listing? Because it says there's a listing, but it also says that you've put it in your pocket. Now, I know that that's not what people always intend. In fact, most of the time it's not what they intend. What they mean to say when they say pocket listing is, hey, I know about a listing, a property that's going to come on the market soon. My seller hasn't told anybody about it, and when they do, they've said that they're going to list it with me. So I want to share with you, other realtors, that this property is going to come onto the market. And if you have a buyer, you might want to give them a heads up. I'd like to sell it quickly and close before Christmas. So be very aware of what that is. Pocket listing, the phrase, is really a red flag to the MLS. And the way it's being used, the intention it's being used today, is not correct. They're not really using the right words to describe what it is they're trying to communicate. So I would encourage you to eliminate the phrase pocket listing unless you actually have a listing that says that the seller does not want it loaded to the MLS and the seller has signed it. There are those rare situations where a seller does not want it shared to the MLS. It may be a business property, for example, a building, and the owner doesn't want the employees to know, or the renters to know, the businesses within the building to know that the building is for sale, because probably their rent's going to go up. There are also situations where relationships are involved, where there may be a divorce going on or has happened. There may be an ex who is a stalker, and the homeowner, spouse, doesn't want that person in the property, and so they may choose to keep it off the MLS to make sure that their safety is preserved. In those cases, it's essentially a listing that is exclusive to or excludes certain parties. But it's not really a pocket listing, because you may have shared it with other agents. And so, again, pocket listing is probably a phrase that we need to retire. What a lot of agents mean is coming soon. That I have a new listing coming soon. It's going to be a 3-bedroom ranch in Rockford, 2 baths. It's mid-century modern, brick, whatever it is. And if you don't have a listing now, coming soon is okay to say. You can put a sign in the yard. You can advertise it on Facebook. You can do all of that stuff, understanding that you risk the possibility of a buyer or a buyer's agent who has a buyer in tow walking up to the door. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I see you're going to list your house pretty soon, but if you sell it to my buyer, we can avoid that commission. I don't know about you, but that's not a risk that I choose to take. Some people do. Some people trust their sellers enough that they put a coming soon sign in the yard. They advertise it on Facebook. They tell everybody when it's going to be. And they even sometimes put the address. And at which point, another agent could go up, knock on the door, and list that property or sell that property, and you wouldn't get paid. So coming soon is okay. The reason that coming soon is okay, and you can put a sign in the yard and so on, is that the seller has not signed a listing contract. Therefore, the seller is not obligated to the terms of the multiple listing rules. That seems simple enough. The seller hasn't said that we're going to abide by the MLS rules and load it up in 3 days and all of that stuff. So we can't, the multiple listing, the board cannot regulate an unlisted property. But by the same token, you run a risk that that property could be scooped by a buyer or another agent. Now, there's a couple other forms that we deal with which are a bit confusing, and we've been over them before, but we're still running into the same confusion. We still get calls all the time and frustrations and so on. One is, seller doesn't want to put their house out there on the market to be seen and shown and all of that stuff until a month from now. Let's say they were, this is a good one right now, this time of year, they want to wait until after the holidays. But you want to get that listing, because after the holidays, they might have changed their minds, and you might not be their favorite agent. They might have chosen someone else by then. So you want to get the listing, but it's not going to go live until the 5th of January, let's say. What do you need to do? Well, you need to have the listing contract. And in the listing contract, it says this offer or this listing is subject to a delayed submission form. It's a separate form. And you submit that form as to the date, indicating the date that is going to go live, January 5th. Now, between October 11 and January 5th, under a delayed submission agreement, you cannot advertise that property in any way, shape, or form. You can't put a sign in the yard. You can't advertise it on Facebook. You can't have an open house. You can't do walkthroughs. You can't show the property to a buyer who says, hey, I'm looking for a mid-century modern Rockford Schools, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. Anything come to mind? You can't say yes until January 5th. That is how strict the delayed submission agreement is. Now, the rules may differ under each association. So if you're in that situation that I just described, that the seller doesn't want to make the thing go live on the MLS until January 5th, but you want to get the listing today, make sure that you follow the rules of your local association and local multiple listing system. Okay? There's another thing called a delayed listing. And the delayed showings. And the delayed showings is actually a clause that is included on the listing contract. I can take a listing today, November 11th, and I can say, seller requests no showings until November 20th, for example. Now, between now and November 20th, I can go out and advertise it on Facebook, schedule an open house, invite everybody to come to the open house. I can do mailings. I can walk neighborhoods. I can tell everybody about it. I can do as much marketing as I want, provided the seller has requested it, signed that on the listing contract, and you have made that information available on the multiple listing sheet, on the data form that they pull up when they're on the MLS. So, however, here's what's going to happen. It's actually happened several times. A buyer's agent comes along and says, yeah, no problem, but my buyer wants to buy it sight unseen. So we've sent you an offer. Do you have the right to not review that offer and not present it to your seller? No. You still have to present that offer unless your delayed showings clause also addresses reviewing offers. For example, seller requests no showings until November 20th and will not review any offers prior to November 21st. Very simple. Now, let's pretend that that agent who's going to write an offer sight unseen says you have to present it on, let's say it's the 15th, on Friday this week. You have to present it. I wrote an offer, you have to present it. I can say, well, actually, my seller waived my obligation to present it by putting this language in here. But if you insist, I'll present it, and maybe it will get accepted. But bear in mind, Mr. Buyer Agent that's pressuring me to do this, that's not the term of the co-brokerage offering. The co-brokerage offering specifically states we are offering a commission to a buyer's agent under these conditions. The conditions being no showings prior to the 20th, and we won't review offers until the 21st. So, we might get it accepted and you might lose your commission. How's that sound? So, be aware that there are a lot of agents out there who don't know the difference between a delayed submission and delayed showing clause. They are using the term pocket listing, which is a red flag, and please change it. If it's coming soon, say that, but be aware that you're taking a risk that somebody could potentially scoop it. Another question that came up over the weekend, or last week I guess it was. No, Saturday. The situation is that the buyer entered an agreement with the seller, fully executed purchase agreement, they extended the inspection period for an extra week because the seller didn't want the buyer in the house while they were on vacation. Okay, no problem. So now we have basically I think it was a 14-day inspection period. But they also indicated that they would still make mortgage application within 3 or 5 days. Again, I'm not going to get into the specifics because it's way past 3 or 5 days. And the buyer is saying, well, I don't want to go and pay for inspections until I know that, or pay for the mortgage application until I know that the inspections are cleared, and then I'll go and make mortgage application. Well, there are a couple of problems here. First of all, in most cases, mortgage lenders don't charge immediately for a mortgage application. They may charge when it's time to go out and send the appraiser out. But the buyer still has the obligation to abide by the contract and had the obligation to go to the mortgage lender and make mortgage application within the 3 or 5 days from the fully executed purchase agreement, not 2 weeks later or more, because they're waiting for the results of the inspections. Now here's a question. Here's the question. The question is, what is the responsibility of the buyer's agent? Do they have a responsibility to tell the other agent that their buyer is in breach of contract? Keep in mind that in this particular example, the seller is not represented by an agent. In my view, if a seller was being represented by an agent, it would be the listing agent's responsibility to have followed up and made sure and exercised due diligence to verify that that buyer had gone to the mortgage company and filed their application for a mortgage. But this is basically a member of the public selling their own home. So on one hand, the buyer's agent has a duty to maintain the buyer's confidentiality under agency law, but they also have a duty which clashes with that under the National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics, Fair and Honest Dealings with the Public. You are, by omission, not being honest with the seller if you don't go back to the seller and say, oh, by the way, I have to inform you my buyer hasn't made mortgage application and therefore is in breach of contract. Because the seller is going to go, well, then I'm going to kill the deal. And is that acting in the best interest of your client? And my comment to this on Facebook, if you saw it last week, is I have not gotten an answer from Gail, but my answer was that the buyer has put the agent in an untenable situation. They have put them between a rock and a hard place. Do we violate agency law, confidentiality, or do we violate the NAR Code of Ethics, which says fair and honest dealings with the public, Article 1? That's a tough one. I think we have to disclose because the potential, in my view, and again, I'm checking with Gail Anderson on this, but in my view, the risk of the seller feeling as though if it ever comes out that that buyer didn't make application on time within the terms of the contract, the risk of that seller suing someone for not informing them is probably greater than the buyer suing the agent for ratting them out for not having done what they were supposed to. So, hang on just a second. I've got a question here from Tammy. Tammy, let me be able to do this. So, Coming from a listing agent perspective, we may want to counter that buyer will provide proof of application within 3 days of accepting an offer. Oh, I love it, Tammy. Yeah, that's beautiful. And I want you all to go to Facebook Connect, or well, you're there now, and read that, because that's exactly what you should do. Exactly. The seller's agent should require verification of the mortgage application within 3 to 5 days. And then if they don't get it, it's a trigger for the listing agent to say, where's my verification that this mortgage has been applied for? It's beautiful language, Tammy, and yes, that's exactly what you should do. And I think we're going to see more of this as buyers and sellers try to protect their rights, try to protect their money, and they don't grasp always the legal consequences of their actions. So I hope that's been helpful. Again, take a moment to thank a veteran, and thank you for joining me. And we will see you next week.